to everybody who's able to join us on the call this morning. Thank you for being here. So this is the third of a three-part series that the Cape Breton Chamber of Commerce has hosted regarding workplace safety. My colleague Blaise McNeil provided the first two presentations, the first one being around the business case for health and safety, and the second one being about developing a safety program that reflects your business. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about using occupational health and safety and some of the tools involving the program and policies, and using the entire framework as a means or as a tool to promote recruitment and retention for your various businesses. So there's a lot of material that I'd like to share with you here today. As Dylan has mentioned, this will be recorded, but I will also be providing Dylan with sort of a one-page summary that will link a lot of our resources that we'll be talking about at the end of this presentation. So on that note, I will start the presentation. So I think the first part to sort of keep in mind or to ask ourselves is sort of what are the various reasons why health and safety is so critical for our business. There are some major advantages that are kind of naturally come from having a healthy health and safety program. The first one being the obvious financial benefits that come from a reduced workplace injuries and illnesses in your workplace. This is something that I believe my colleague would have spoken about, but we will kind of talk about that a little bit in further detail as well. Also, the importance of sort of having a healthy work environment, which of course is represented through a robust occupational health and safety program. But having this, we have seen that there's a direct correlation between the reduction in absenteeism or the overall job satisfaction among employees, knowing that they're going to work that is safe and that values their own workplace safety from both a physical as well as from a mental health perspective. And finally, having a strong occupational health and safety framework demonstrates that your company values its employees' well-being, and that is certainly a strong indicator of their future experience with the company. So those are sort of basic tenets around the importance of health and safety. So what we're going to talk about here today is there are three main areas. One is I sort of want to talk a little bit about information around the impact of accidents, injuries, and illness. So we're going to sort of explore some of the worst case scenarios and the impacts that could have on your business in the event of an injury or an incident. Second, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the actions that we can use to develop a safety system that will sort of enhance your ability to recruit and to retain various workers. And finally, we're going to conclude by discussing some of the additional tools and resources that are available for free for businesses as well as employees through the Government of Nova Scotia. And I'm just going to walk you through those resources and just show you how to access them as something either to onboard employees or as a means of continuing education to ensure that they are comfortable and safe in your workplace. So this slide here that you'll see in front of your the slide that you'll see in front of you here it sort of represents some of the statistics that have been posted on the Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia. If you go to the website there, they also have another website called Work Safe for Life, which you'll see a lot of information there. On there, they do post some of the statistics. So I just want to share some, I think, four important areas that we should all consider. So these numbers, unfortunately, are from 2022. They haven't posted last year's numbers quite yet, but I think they are somewhat indicative of the overall health and safety environment here in Nova Scotia. So the first one will just show you sort of, that in 2022, we've had 5,420 injuries at work. Similarly, in the second slide here, we'll see that unfortunately, in terms of the worst case scenario, was involving a fatality at work. We've had 24 fatalities in 2022, and I believe last year that number came down to 18. And in terms of this slide here, we'll just show you some of the various injuries that are most common for workers here in Nova Scotia. As you'll see, and I think this will come as no surprise to anybody, but a large majority of those injuries are related to strains and sprains, which can be the result or can be mitigated or avoided through a strong ergonomics program. But again, the injury rates are not limited to that particular area. And finally, I just wanted to sort of highlight or illustrate sort of the various age categories in which workers are being injured. And as you'll see, there is, unfortunately, it's somewhat even across the various age bands, which says that there is no particular group or demographic that is more likely than others to be injured. It's really across the board. It's somewhat even. So all that to say is that the accidents and workplace injuries are a unfortunate reality of our business here in Nova Scotia and across all of Canada. But again, there are means of mitigating and avoiding these consequences, and this all starts through having a healthy occupational health and safety program. So, from a business perspective, what are some of the primary reasons why we, as whether it's entrepreneurs, managers, supervisors, or business owners, what are some of the reasons why we should be mindful of the importance of health and safety? Well, of course, the first reason naturally is because this is a requirement of the law here in Nova Scotia. Under the Nova Scotia Occupational Health and Safety Act and its associated regulations, there are very clear requirements when it comes to maintaining and ensuring the health and safety of your employees. And we will talk about that, some of those sections in a little bit more detail further on. But again, there's also the simple moral and ethical value in ensuring that we are maintaining the safety of our colleagues and our friends here in the workplace. But finally, having a safety program and a healthy environment makes good business sense, both in terms of the minimization of expenses related to injuries, but also in your ability to bring in business, but also to recruit and to retain highly skilled and very dedicated employees. So next, we're just going to talk about some of the key benefits. Basically, on the short term, investing in your safety program and your policy will avoid legal actions, which can be either the result of an incident or a fatality and the resultant investigation costs. But of course, it could also be injuries. And even though we are under a workers' compensation system where there is automatic coverage, there may be parallel or related legal actions as well. Similarly, short term, you'd want to avoid any incidents that might derail or in any way slow down your business operations. And this, in the event of an incident or fatality, the resulting investigation would look at some of the materials and equipment that were in place, and if necessary, there can be stop work orders issued on particular aspects or on your business as a whole, which in part, given the nature of your business, this can have a very significant impact on your production, either for that week or for that particular month, which again will result in deficiencies in the financial performance. Long term, of course, the value is in terms of establishing a healthy workplace culture, which, as we will see, is a strong attractant for new employees looking to sort of work somewhere that's safe and values them. It will provide a competitive advantage. We have heard recently that there is, among, I guess, newcomers and immigrants to the province, there is already an understanding or an internal knowledge about some of the businesses that really do invest in their both physical and mental safety at work. And obviously that has become a competitive advantage for some businesses looking to retain. And finally, the enhanced reputation. We can look at that on both sides of the coin. One is that the negative impact on your business from being associated with a time loss claim or an injury or a fatality can be significant. But conversely, having that positive safety culture can also go a long way in terms of recruiting or even having employees leave one particular business, sometimes for the same pay, but just knowing that they have a better workplace health and safety structure is important to them. So for the next section, I just wanted to sort of share some of the avoidable tragedies that you may have seen in the news recently. And also I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the consequences that unfortunately could apply sort of through the legal framework that we have here in Nova Scotia. So this next slide, I just found four articles that you may have seen in the news here in Nova Scotia anytime in the past few years. This is something, it's more to sort of remind you of the realities of some of these incidents. Here's this one, unfortunately, was a significant situation where this roofer was unwilling to comply with some of the regulatory requirements, and in that case, a 4-month jail sentence was imposed. Now, a lot of people are not aware that under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, fines, there is a financial penalty, but the courts do have the ability to issue a custodial sentence up to 2 years, which of course is very rare and really reserved for the worst case scenarios. But unfortunately, that was the situation here. You'll also have probably seen, highlights involving, whether it's falls from ladders or falls from heights, which is quite common as well. But all of which is to say that, in the event that such a horrible situation occurs at your business or any business, there are a lot of consequences that will result, not simply from, the human aspect, but also from the business perspective as well. So this next slide, I just wanted to again share that under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that the province or the officers enforcing the act do have the jurisdiction and the ability to lay charges in where warranted. Again, they have a lot of discretion as to what the situation would require charges or not. But I just wanted to share this this slide here, which contains a QR code, which will take you really to a PDF that the Occupational Health and Safety Division publishes and makes it available to the public, which will sort of provide a list of all the recent charges and ongoing trials, but also some of the penalties that have been handed down. And here in Nova Scotia, the largest penalty to date has been a total fine amount of $150,000, which is very significant. I don't remember the details of that particular conviction, but it's all to say that there are very real financial penalties, and this does not incorporate or consider the legal fees as well that would be resulting from having to defend yourself in a trial, should you ever unfortunately find yourself in that situation. We also wanted to mention some of the other financial penalties that are available to officers. When an officer conducts an inspection at various workplaces, they do have recourse to what we call the administrative penalties regulations, which we do have a lot of materials available on that. But this is really a situation where an officer can issue a penalty directly on site. It's not limited to an employer necessarily. It can be issued to an employee, and a supervisor, or an employer. And as you'll see from the table here, the amounts can vary from $100 for the employee to $250 to their supervisor to $500 on the first incident. If they are re-inspected within 6 months and is found to have the same situation, those fine amounts will double, and again they will double consequently as well. So as you can imagine, this is sort of outside of the court system. This is kind of more it would be more similar to, I guess, to a ticket being issued on site. But again, it can also is designed to reduce some of the issues that they're seeing on site kind of immediately. And I think we've talked already about fines and imprisonment, but also just to sort of highlight the fines that are available to the courts if ever, the situation is so dire that they choose to charge under the Health and Safety Act, that a judge can issue for a first offense a fine up to $250,000, and beyond that, if it involves a fatality or it's a subsequent offense, up to a maximum of $500,000. On this next slide, I just wanted to go over some of the requirements when it comes to accident reporting. This is an important aspect just to kind of keep in mind, as there have been some minor changes in the past few years. But just for everybody's reference here, if ever you're in a situation in your workplace, or if you're aware of a workplace that might encounter one of these situations, in the event of a fatality, they must report this situation immediately to the Occupational Health and Safety Division. In the event of a serious serious injury, which has been defined as unconsciousness or a fracture, an amputation, not to minimize it, but I think it's anything that would really naturally involve a trip to the hospital. That has to be reported as soon as possible, but within 24 hours. And the third category here would be a serious incident, but not involving anybody being injured. So this would be an accidental explosion or destruction of property. And similarly, this must be reported within 24 hours. And the reason I wanted to highlight this reporting requirement is because, one, it is a legal requirement, and failure to report an incident under these categories could be subject to a charge or to a fine. But also, unfortunately, a lot of businesses, excuse me, or supervisors sometimes mistakenly believe that filling out the Form 7 required for Workers' Compensation Board, excuse me, automatically meets this requirement. So just to make it clear that you still have to report separately to the Occupational Health and Safety Division in the event that you are in one of those situations. So next up, we're going to talk about, some of the benefits. It's time to shift to the positive aspects in terms of having a strong occupational health and safety framework, and how that will impact positively on your business when it comes to recruitment. So the benefits of a strong health and safety framework for your business, as you can see, they're quite numerous. And fortunately, we've had some really great research that has been conducted by the Institute of Workplace Health in Ontario, where they have conducted studies very recently with immigrants and newcomers in Ontario who sort of, 2 or 3 years after their arrival in Canada, and they were able to get some of their feedback and experiences with respect to work and finding work. But more specifically and more importantly for our purposes, some of the issues that they had around occupational health and safety, and also some of the suggestions that they had in terms of improving their experience and using that tool really as a primary means of attracting qualified candidates to your workplace. So again, what they had reported is that there was definitely a positive employee morale and a reduction of turnover by seeing and knowing that that their workplace the workplace experience was valued. There was a reduction in sick days, whether that be from physical strain or mental strain, consistent customer service, stable production. Again, there's a reduction in time loss claims or situations that might result in downtime, whether it's through a stop work order or a voluntary ceasing of production, so that there was an impact there as well. As well as we talked about reputational damage, where especially for small businesses that have, where your reputation oftentimes is as important as your product itself, the impact on your reputation can go both ways. So having employees speak positively about their experience there, sharing the positive news will often attract similarly suitable candidates as well. Again, the competitive advantage when recruiting new talent that we've heard, especially for newcomers, people who may not be aware of the entire pool of available employers, sometimes will rely on the word of mouth of their family or close friends. And hearing how one recruiter or one employer, significantly invests in their understanding of health and safety will sometimes be the ultimate determining factor in the decision to go there. And finally, there's a reduction for those employers who are required to pay Workers' Compensation Board premiums. There can be a reduction where there is no claims over a certain period of time. Next up, and I think this is an obvious advantage as well, is mitigating exposure to legal liability. So having a strong safety framework, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, whether it's through a safety policy or your safety program. There's various aspects of it that will help in terms of reducing your liability. So I'm going to sort of shift a little bit here and talk more from a perspective of protecting yourself from a situation that might involve a workplace investigation. So first of all, it's important to remember that every employer here in Nova Scotia has a legal duty to provide a safe and healthy workplace for their employees. This is something that's addressed very specifically under Section 13 of the Nova Scotia Occupational Health and Safety Act. So in a situation of an injury, that would sort of be the first avenue that an investigator or an officer would look at and determine whether or not that has been met. Now, the part that's important to remember is that under the Occupational Health and Safety Act allows for charges, and those charges are what we consider a strict liability offense, which means that there's no requirement for the department or for the division to show any intention to commit the act. All that's really needs to be demonstrated is that this is the actual requirement of the legislation, and the actual reality in that particular workplace fell below that standard, and therefore the charges are justified. There is, however, one defense, or there are several limited defenses, but the primary defense available for employers is what we call due diligence. And due diligence, in the most basic term, is to being able to demonstrate to the court that you have done everything and anything and everything that is available to you in the circumstances to reduce or eliminate that particular harm. So that's something to keep in mind, that this is another reason why having a healthy safety program that kind of meets those requirements can also show that you have turned your mind, that you have made every effort to sort of eliminate or mitigate those hazards as well. So another thing too with health and safety programs can also help employers by avoiding, again, the responding to compliance orders, which would be a result if a safety officer comes to your workplace and finds something that perhaps does not meet the requirements of the legislation. They can issue compliance orders. Again, if it's something that is a significant hazard, they may issue what we call stop work orders on a piece of machinery, which again can also have impacts on your business. And finally, as we discussed, some of those legal penalties can be quite difficult on your business and can have a negative impact both on your existing business, but also perhaps on your future business, or at least your intention on submitting tenders for businesses or things, or for tenders to government, or situations like that, where having a conviction for health and safety may have a serious impact on your ability to succeed in the tender. So again, some of the financial benefits, again, we talked about the reduction in workplace injuries, but also some of the positives that employers who do have a strong health and safety program can, in certain situations, receive financial incentives from the Workers' Compensation Board. So I've also shared a QR code here, which will take you directly to that link and provide some information on what that might look like, and whether or not you would qualify for this financial incentive. In terms of a business advantage to the workplace, having taking a proactive approach to health and safety not only will impact the workers who are present at your workplace, but also those entering the workplace as well. I think it sends a very strong message, in terms of the value to your employees, but also to the public at large, that you are a business that sort of understands the requirements of the Act. You understand what your responsibilities are, and you're obviously walking the walk when it comes to health and safety. So, remembering, we all appreciate that customers have lots of choices in today's world when it comes to where they choose to invest their money, but there is also a correlation between customers willing to invest with companies who have placed the health and safety of their employees at the forefront of their business, rather than something that they think of as an afterthought. Of course, risk management when it comes to insurance rates is another topic to remember, as well as overall social responsibility. Just showing that you have turned your mind to some of the issues impacting workplaces, whether it be from a discrimination perspective, or from that of sort of promoting workers' involvements with respect to the business, perhaps participating on the safety committee or things like that. It also will sort of put you in a strong position when it comes to your marketing as well. So for the next few slides, I just want to review some important occupational health and safety concepts that's important for businesses to understand, mainly for themselves, but also as part of the onboarding process. When you have a new employee joining your business, you want to make sure that some of these concepts are really shared with them, because this will sort of be a fundamental aspect of how you conduct business, but also of their experience within your workplace. I'm hopeful that a lot of these concepts may be already familiar to you, but I think it would be somewhat helpful to just review them quickly. while we're here. So first off, I'd like to play a very short, well, it's about 2-minute video on this topic, which we call the internal responsibility system. As I'm sure most of you are well aware, the internal responsibility system is a theory. It's basically the underlying theory that governs occupational health and safety here in Nova Scotia, but truly for every jurisdiction across Canada. And I think I would extend that further to say that most Commonwealth jurisdictions also have based their occupational health and safety legislation on the concept of the internal responsibility system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video that our division has recently created, and this is intended to sort of help explain this process. I also want to make you aware that it's available on YouTube in both English and French, and we've also have several versions that have closed captioning in various languages available as well. All right. Well, thank you for your attention to that video. So I think the overall message that we want to really remember from this is that safety is really not the purview of one particular person in the workplace. It's not solely the responsibility of the employer nor the supervisor. It's essentially each and every one have a responsibility when it comes to occupational health and safety. But of course, our responsibility will vary based on our ability to do certain things. So this next slide will sort of explain a little bit, hopefully, what that looks like. And the important thing to remember of the internal responsibility system is that it's a system based on authority, responsibility, and accountability. So the best way to really explain that is to just sort of to share one of the realities of our modern workplace, or at least of our province. Here in Nova Scotia, we have when it comes to small businesses. Now, I'll say businesses with less than 20 employees, which represent a significant part of our workplaces. We have approximately 20,000, between 20 and 23,000 workplaces of such size here in Nova Scotia, whereas we only have approximately, depending on our staffing times, we usually have approximately 50 occupational health and safety officers. So of course, as you can appreciate, there is no way that an officer can go into each and every workplace and provide it with a stamp of approval or certification to say that this workplace has met all the conditions and it's meeting requirements. That's not the case. What the internal responsibility system does is it really puts that responsibility on each and every one of us within our own workplaces, and nobody knows a workplace better than the people who work there. So the only time an officer, well, it's not an only time, an officer has the right to inspect proactively anywhere that they wish, but ideally, an officer would really only intervene in a situation where the internal responsibility system is not functioning, where the communication has broken down. So I'm just going to take a few seconds to sort of explain what this internal responsibility looks like and why it's so important. So as we can see here from the top, we'll have sort of the top level of our governance structure. We'll have our directors, our VPs, or whoever's sort of at the top of the organization. Of course, they will be, they are responsible for managing the business, for financing structures, for lots of other things impacting the business. So typically, they will not be able to supervise the ground level employee to make sure that they're wearing the PPE or that they're following procedures. So effectively, they will delegate that responsibility, and that will keep going down until essentially the ultimate level of responsibility of supervision will sort of usually rest with the supervisor. Um, so the authority will be delegated downwards. Now, what is the expectation of the responsibility of the employee is at a minimum to report and to share any risks in which they come across that are not already dealt with. So if that employee comes across a situation of a hazard, and that again, that's not limited to physical hazard. It could be a hygiene issue. It could be an occupational health issue, such as air quality. We could be talking sun protection. So there's lots of aspects there. The responsibility and the requirement of the employee will be to elevate that situation to the supervisor. If the supervisor has the ability and the authority to make that required change, that's wonderful. But as we know, sometimes this might require financing. This might require bringing in consultants or having an expert come on site. So typically, that supervisor will continue to escalate their request until they reach somebody who's able to sort of make that happen. The last part of this is the accountability aspect, which, as we know, we've already talked about accountability when it comes to investigations. So in the event of a bad situation, or if there is a failure in an investigation occurs, they will look to see, did the employee properly report that? What did the supervisor do at that point? And upwards until they'll find out who ultimately had accountability for that particular action. So it's not enough to simply delegate that. The accountability still remains with you, but it's just a system. And the third part of the system is also the importance of communication. I'm just going to, and this, you can see this on the third slide here as well. So this is a pamphlet that we've recently created. It's available in both English and French. This is the QR code if you'd like to see it online, but it will sort of explain what the internal responsibility system and how it impacts each and every one of us depending on our level of authority and responsibility. And here you'll see the primary principles of that the employee has to report any situation that's unsafe to their supervisor to give them an opportunity to address that. And the last aspect of the IRS is that it provides a plan for participation and communication. So I think you're familiar with the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee in situations where your business has more than 20 employees. So that would be an avenue, and they would also be involved in the communication when it comes to reporting these incidences and to coming up with means to mitigate the risk. Next up, I'm just going to quickly talk about some of the rights and responsibilities of employers and workers here in Nova Scotia. Once again, we have an excellent pamphlet on this available in both English and French. At the very end, I will share a list of our resources so you'll be able to access it there. I only mention that because it may be a helpful tool to have as part of your onboarding process as well when you go over some of these concepts with your new workers. So just for everybody's reference, we're just going to quickly go over some of the rights and responsibilities under the Act before we sort of get into how to use this health and safety in terms of a recruitment and retention tool. So as I'm sure most of you are familiar, the Act does have specific provisions that will talk about duties and responsibilities, and they're broken down based on what workplace party you are. Just for your own reference, a workplace party is not limited to an employee or a supervisor, but would also include contractors, constructors, owners, suppliers, self-employed persons, as well as architects and engineers, I believe are also listed under the Act. But for today, we're really going to limit the discussion to employers and sort of the employee and supervisor aspects. So when it comes to an employer, For those of us who fall into that category, this is sort of the basic duties of the employer under the Act. Of course, is to ensure the health and safety of everyone at or near the workplace. You have a particular number of precautions in place here, which is of course, to ensure the health and safety, to provide and maintain equipment and machines, to provide the necessary safety instruction and training for your workers, to ensure that employees are familiar with hazards in the workplace, which I think a lot of you will understand that will be part of the onboarding process, but also to ensure that employees are not exposed to health and safety hazards on an ongoing basis. And that's sort of part of the inspection, the regular inspection framework, but also having that two-way communication with the employee who's in the best position to sort of identify and to report hazards in the workplace. In terms of duties, every employer has a duty to cooperate with their business's occupational health and safety committee or representative, but also with the occupational health and safety division if they're ever part of an inspection process. Of course, they automatically must conduct their business in accordance with the Act and regulations, and where it applies to have a policy or program available. Next up, we're going to talk about Section 17 in terms of the employees. Now, just before I get into that, we'll also be talking about the supervisors. And here in Nova Scotia, the legislation doesn't define their roles and responsibilities of a supervisor. So whereas that might be the case in other jurisdictions, that's not the case here in Nova Scotia. So really, they fall into somewhat of a gray area where, depending on the extent of their authority and ability, they may be considered an employee or an employer. If that supervisor, for example, is responsible for hiring and firing and discipline, they may be closer to the role of an employer, and they may be subject to Section 13. If it's more a situation perhaps of a lead or somebody with more experience that might be able to answer questions, but they don't have any actual authority when it comes to discipline, then they would be considered under Section 17, which would apply to employees, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So as an employee, they must also take precautions to ensure the health and safety of themselves and others at or near the workplace. A part of that, it will be to cooperate with a committee or the safety representatives, their employer, fellow employees, as well as the department. If they're subject to an inspection, an employee can also receive an order or administrative penalty, so they'd also have to comply with that. Of course, they have to ensure that they're wearing all protective equipment, that they comply with the Act and regulations, and as we saw, that they have the duty to report all hazards immediately to their supervisor so that it can be addressed. Last up, we talked about supervisors and their various roles, but they also have somewhat unique responsibilities, which of course is to ensure that the employees that they're supervising work in compliance with the Act, that they're actually correctly using the prescribed protective equipment, that they can provide advice on actual hazards, and of course they'll also provide written instructions on how to properly use the various equipment in the workplace. Last up is I just want to quickly talk about policies and programs in the workplace. I know my colleague would have touched on this during, I believe, the second webinar, but for just to go over quickly, and this is sort of the third pamphlet that I wanted to show to you here today. Again, available in English and French, but I'll just talk about what is a safety policy and when is it required. Essentially, if you have more than 5 employees in your workplace and you're required to have a safety policy, this will talk a little bit about the requirements of that and what you would like it to contain. I'm also going to share some resources available that will provide examples of what a policy would look like. In a situation where your business has more than 20 employees, then you will also be required to have what we call an occupational health and safety program, which will be much more of it'll be a bulkier document, but it will contain a lot more requirements that are outlined in the Act, and which you can find listed here as well. So that will include stuff such as training requirements, PPE requirements, procedures, policies. It's a lot more of an in-depth occupational health and safety framework, I guess, because of the size of the business. So something to keep in mind. Now, I guess, which brings us sort of to the main part of our presentation, which is using health and safety as a resource for attracting and retaining immigrants and newcomers to Nova Scotia. So the first, and this is a very topical issue. It's a very current issue. I think we're all familiar, or we're well aware, with the existing government's intention of doubling the population of Nova Scotia by 2060 through a strong immigration mandate. And we've already seen the impacts on that and the growth in our province. So with this in mind, we want to make sure that as businesses and organizations that we are adjusting our business and our recruitment tools to really attract and retain sort of the best workers for our business. So I think it's best to sort of start off about sort of your brand as a business, what that might look like. I know for most of you, most people already have this in mind. They've already taken the time, but for some of those businesses that may not really thought about how they wish to present themselves, I think that's an important first step in terms of how you choose to brand yourself with respect to who you're also looking to attract. And I think it's important to not minimize the impact, the importance of that as well. So if you want to put that out there, that you are a place that's welcoming, that you've made the following efforts or investments in terms of onboarding and maintaining a particular group of workers, that's something that you want to highlight sort of on the front end. That will be part of your branding. In terms of sources of international talent, again, it's not limited to this, but I thought it would be helpful to perhaps look at where a lot of our talent will be coming from or is currently coming from. Again, these are different. They have different requirements in terms of having these particular um, um, uh, qualifications, and again, I'm not going to get into them because this is not my area of expertise. But for the most part, you will often be dealing with foreign nationals who are already in Canada. Be receiving applications from nationals outside of Canada. I think we're all familiar with the economic mobility pathways here in Nova Scotia as well, which is sort of a means to sort of fast track various immigration policies. I have no doubt you'll be receiving a lot of interest from international students who are currently studying, international students who are about to graduate, as well as spouses of temporary foreign workers. I believe there are some exceptions or allowances for them to work in Canada, Nova Scotia. And finally, the International Experience Canada, which I guess is a federal program that provides eligible participants with an open work permit. So just to give some context to some of the candidates that you might be looking at or speaking to. And this next slide just provides a bit of some considerations that we should keep in mind. And again, a lot of this was generated from that excellent research that was done in Ontario with recent immigrants and newcomers. And some of the things that were shared was that it's important for I guess for employers to also remember that our first job in Nova Scotia is often different than the work that they may have done previously to arriving here in Nova Scotia. Oftentimes there may be a difference in terms of the tools and machinery. Sometimes they may be very familiar with it. Other times these are machines or tools that they've never seen before. It's also very common that they may be asked to do tasks that they've not done in the past, and the overall culture in the workplace may feel very strange and very different to anything that they've experienced in the past. And it's for these reasons, and there are others as well that can also involve language differences and other aspects. But for these reasons, new workers, and again, it's new workers regardless of age, whether it's a young person entering the workplace or somebody immigrating, new workers to the workplace are statistically at higher risk of getting injured at work than somebody who's been there a bit longer. So I think we're all aware of that, but we also want to ensure that we're providing that extra level of support. So what are some of the common hazards that are faced by newcomer workers, when starting a new employment? Well, of course, there's the exposure to workplace hazards is something, especially if it's dangerous work. There might not be that pre-existing comfort with dealing with hazards. Sometimes, there's inadequate workplace protection and policies depending where they may go, which again is part of this discussion because some businesses don't necessarily understand the need to transition or to adapt some of their policies and protocols depending on the nature of the talent that they're bringing in. Sometimes there's low worker awareness, both in terms of the new worker starting, but also some of the existing workers understanding that this person may not have that same level of comfort and may need some more time allowances or perhaps more time to go over the use of machinery. And again, this, in limited exceptions, we've also talked to workers who've come from a culture that discourages worker participation. And by that, I mean that, here in Nova Scotia, we have three basic rights as a worker, which is sort of entrenched in our legislation. We have the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse unsafe work. Well, what does the right to know and the right to participate look like? Well, for the most part, we know we have the right to know anything that could hurt us in the workplace, but the right to participate also gives us the right to speak up, to report hazards, to be part of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, to participate in internal inspections or inspections done by the Occupational Health and Safety Division. And that sometimes those are sometimes concepts that are very foreign, where there are some workers have said, the expectation in the past was that I come to work, I don't say anything, I don't disturb, I don't ask any questions. Obviously, that's very different than here in Nova Scotia. And we want to remind people that not only do they have the right to speak up, but there's that expectation, that's a requirement that they have, and it's going to be definitely welcome from their supervisor. So, of course, as I mentioned before, new workers are more at risk, so we also have to be mindful of that, especially in the first month of their employment. Oftentimes because there might be a bit of shyness or reticence to speak up, so we really want to encourage that. So this was some of the feedback, some of the struggles that workers have experienced in the past, and things that they, sort of, I wish I had known, or some considerations that they've shared for employers to sort of hopefully recognize some of these challenges and eliminate them, or provide some assistance around them. We did receive some feedback in terms of interpersonal relationships in the workplace, especially when you're coming from a very different culture or background. Workplaces here in Canada may seem very different, not just in terms of the work we do, but also sort of those interpersonal relationships with our colleagues, our supervisors, the employers, the trainers. Some of this will be very, very new. We've heard a lot about there is a strong appetite to receive more practical hands-on training, especially provided by experienced workers, not necessarily a supervisor, your boss, or somebody who could discipline you, just a more experienced worker who was willing or able to take the time to sort of go over it on a much slower timeline, as well as more information around accident reporting policies. And as I mentioned before, sometimes the work culture is very different, where you don't report injuries, where you don't want to share these things. Of course, that's very different here in Nova Scotia. So understanding that not only is it a requirement, but it's encouraged, it's mandated, and it's supported. We heard a lot about language differences, especially around occupational health and safety training. And this is something that we here at the Health and Safety Division are looking to, we're expanding our resources in various languages. But of course, for a newcomer worker, this can be quite a challenge if, you may go through a standard form of orientation and you may have reviewed the material, but the comprehension is not necessarily there. So there are ways of sort of closing that gap by providing translation services. And we'll talk about that in the next few slides, as well as the fact that, like I mentioned, some employers expect workers to ask questions of their supervisor. If you have any questions, please speak up. However, in some cultures, that's quite frowned upon, that you don't address somebody in a higher position of authority than you. Of course, that's not the case here, but it's important that we really share that and demonstrate how it's done, or walk the walk, when the situation arises. So the next few slides are some tips for facilitating workplace integration and retention through occupational health and safety. And again, I think it's important to remember that health and safety is just one tool in the toolbox of employers when it comes to recruitment and retention. There are many, many others, but I think it's a lost opportunity to not use health and safety in some of the interactions that allow you to sort of deal with your new workers on a one-on-one basis, and sometimes break down some of those barriers. So I see it more as an additional tool to use, and not to just kind of have it as an afterthought, or just using a standard onboarding program, because that's sometimes it won't do justice to your efforts, and it sometimes will lead to frustrations with your new employees. So next up, I just want to talk about some of the onboarding tips and some of the suggestions that were brought forward from both the employers as well as employees. So again, the safety orientation is an opportunity for employers to sort of set the stage when it comes to creating a more inclusive and welcoming workplace. So rather than it just having to be sort of a check before you can start work, it actually should be almost like a welcoming experience. Part of that would be providing a tour of the workplace on the first day, which of course is a great initiative. Using this opportunity to make introductions and provide a platform for new employees to share their professional achievements with their new team. So again, sometimes there is a tendency to perhaps not ask too many questions about people's past experiences, but when it comes to newcomers or immigrants, that's actually can often be welcomed, and it provides an opportunity for that person to share their background and to sort of connect with their new employees, and to show that with a situation, if that is the case, that they do have similar parallel experiences that they can relate to, or that they can share it in that context. One of the things that we also heard was that appointing a primary contact for a new employee for the duration of the onboarding process can often be very helpful for them. It just provides knowing that okay, I'm going to be your mentor for the next few weeks. I'm sort of your go-to person. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I have the approval of my supervisor, my boss, to be your contact. So don't hold off. Sometimes that's seen as a lot less scary than perhaps having to deal directly with your manager or supervisor. Having a primary contact that is dedicated to performing regular check-ins with your new employees, so they never feel that situation of being isolated or alone. Again, considering onboarding tools that are clear and explicit, and perhaps even using more illustrations as much as possible in your onboarding materials is very helpful. We've done a lot of work with the restaurant and hospitality industry here in Halifax that have welcomed a lot of newcomers, and this is something that they've actively done. They have really translated their materials. They've used a lot more pictograms and illustration when having these discussions, and that has gone a long way in terms of the comfort of the new employees, as well as developing tools that enable new employees to learn in their primary first language can also support more diverse workforces. And again, this is something that we at the safety branch are looking to develop. I'm going to show you some of the materials that we have. They're available online. We definitely urge employers to print out some of the materials we have in various languages. Make those available either like on your safety board, or you can hand out as part of your orientation package to new employees. But really sort of looking to close that gap and to provide as many supports as possible is recognized as being very valuable for new employees. Mentorship programs, of course, you can have a formal or informal mentorship or buddy program. Of course, they've found that mentors are very helpful in supporting new employees from different cultural backgrounds, especially around this kind of understanding the more subtle rules around the workplace. We take it for granted when it comes to taking our breaks or our lunches, or whether it's performance appraisals or evaluations, things that we've done 100 times we often take for granted, whereas somebody going through the first time may be quite apprehensive. So just having that soft approach is very, very helpful. Of course, in the beginning, and again, this depending on your workplace, but if it's possible to have a mentor that shares similar cultural or backgrounds to that person, that might close the gap when it comes to language barriers. Also, an important part too is sort of educating your own staff, especially at management level, around sort of reduction bias. Having cross-cultural education is very valuable as well. So again, this depends on the size of your business. If you're in a larger business with different departments, you may want to sort of switch up the mentors a little bit, so that the person doesn't feel that they're siloed into the one area where they work, and that they'll kind of create a deeper connection with other aspects of the business. And like I mentioned before, sort of DEI training and safety committee training is very, very helpful as well. Making intercultural competency training available for leaderships, but again, for everybody. And I am going to talk about some of the free resources that we have available, something that you can keep in mind as part of your orientation, but also as part of your continuing education. Additional training or workshops can be made available to employees who are interested in sort of maybe closing that gap or being a mentor. And I think one of the most valuable aspects is really using the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee. As you know, we understand our right to participate, but I think it's important that newcomers or new workers or immigrant workers understand not only do they have the right, but they are welcome and invited to be members of the Safety Committee, because not only will that provide a very helpful and invaluable perspective, it will lead to stronger attachment to that particular workplace, but it'll also it will enhance and inform the committee's actions as well by providing that additional lens. So it's important that it's not just about inviting one or two new workers onto the committee, but also sort of adapting the committee to be a safe and welcoming place for them as well. And oftentimes that could be part of sort of the committee's mandatory education or training, if that's the case in your particular workplaces. There are some courses available for committees to help with that as well. And I think this would summarize some of the tips that we've heard. Of course, culturally training and support, developing policies and consultation with the actual workers, hopefully through the JOSH committee, including information on workers' rights and responsibilities, employment standards, information around harassment and bullying, as well as post-injury supports, because as we heard, a lot of times people don't know where to go in the event that they have an injury. Outlining Canadian workplace norms and expectations. Sometimes that's as simple as sort of start-stop times, when to take your breaks, communication, things like that. Knowing how to exercise your right to refuse, and that you have the right to do that, and that it's protected, and what that might look like. There'll be worksite specific safety training, as we know that there can be an overall orientation, but you also have to have it specific to the hazards on that site. And also we talked about workplace culture and communication, and how that's a very easy way of updating or adapting your workplace to be attractive to retaining newcomers to the province. This next slide here, I just wanted to share some great resources when it comes to onboarding immigrants and newcomer workers. Hopefully you're familiar with all of them. I've also included one which is the Pictou County Partnership have created what they call an employer guide to inclusive and welcoming workplaces, which I've included the QR code there. It's a great resource. If you haven't used it already, they have some great tips and tricks as well that I would definitely urge you to consider. So in the few minutes that we have left in the presentation, I would like to quickly go through some of our free health and safety resources that are available to you. Consider it both from the perspective of your business as an employer, but also, in terms of how you could sort of use it in your desire to sort of retain and recruit new workers. So again, we talked about some of the information pamphlets that we have available. These are the existing topics that we have. We continuously expand our resources. So hopefully this time next year we'll have 4 or 5 more available. This is the QR code here where you can access them all online. Like I said, they're available in English and French. I talked about some of our multilingual resources. So we currently offer these are what we call Iraq cards. Oftentimes you'll see some of these material at trade shows. We're very active at trade shows and job fairs, but again, these are also available online on our website, so you can just print them off there. We have what we call Iraq cards, we're talking about the work of the safety branch. We'll also, because we're co-located with technical safety, so they will do elevators and lifts, boilers and pressure equipment, amusement parks, basically all the more technical aspects of the workplace. So we also work with those inspectors. And what you'll see here are sort of our basic occupational health and safety cards. They'll talk about your basic rights and responsibilities. And on the back, they'll have the contact information for the Department of Labor, so how to contact us. And we currently offer those in English, French, Arabic, Hindi, Mi'kmaq, Portuguese, Russian, Chinese, Spanish, and Ukrainian. And like I said, they're available online as well. So that's something that, for a worker whose first language is one of those ones, it's often very comforting to sort of see that material available in your workplace as well. I showed you our first video here on the internal responsibility system available through our YouTube channel. We also have a second video here, which is called What to Expect When a Health and Safety Officer Shows Up at Your Workplace. This is really meant to sort of to clarify sort of their roles and responsibilities, but to also just to remind employers sort of what their duty is in terms of helping employers achieve compliance with the regulations, and also supporting workers if they have any questions, during an inspection. So that's a great resource, and we're going to continue expanding our library of resources. So please stay tuned and check back with us. We have lots of different topical resources, so you can sign up through our newsletter to access these. Sometimes they're specific to particular industries, such as I think we had one on healthcare over here, but you'll also see this one was created during COVID on communicable diseases, and we also issue regular safety bulletins. One has come out very recently on sun safety, so if you considering what the elevated temperatures that we'll be experiencing shortly, something that you might want to consider as well. So this here will show you some of our other resources. You can sign up for our quarterly newsletter called The Signal, which we issue, of course, every quarter. And we also will push out various bulletins and alerts. This is sort of depending on the level of severity, safety alert being the highest and a safety notice sort of being the less severe. But again, this will sort of keep you involved and keep you update with any developments in occupational health and safety here in Nova Scotia. I'd just like to play a very short video. This one's about 10 seconds long, but I'm just curious if anybody is familiar with this or has seen this video. All right, so hopefully, you may have seen that video, and it's a great video mainly because it sort of exemplifies this next resource or the value of this next resource, which is our new web app called NovaSafe. And in the situation in the video, that lady was asked to go to the materials room and grab something from the top shelf. She came across a ladder, but she wasn't sure whether or not it met the CSA standard for a proper ladder in the workplace. So she checked up. So she took out her phone and went to NovaSafe. So NovaSafe is a new resource that we released in last year. It's a mobile-friendly website, which means that unlike a sort of a traditional app, you don't have to download it from the App Store. You can use it from your desktop, from your smartphone, from anywhere. But it's sort of it adapts to your iOS or your Android so that it's so you can read it clearly. It was designed to provide legible and easy to understand health and safety information. We currently have 32 topics on NovaSafe, and we expand that list continuously. So we're going to be adding, I think, 16 more topics this year. So I just wanted to show you one of our recent topics that we've released, which is on harassment and violence. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, this is a very important topic, and there will be likely some changes to the regulation or the legislation as a whole in the coming years. So we just want to make sure that all workplace parties, whether it's employers and employees, are aware of what harassment and violence looks like. And so this will kind of be our front page. Will provide a summary of the information. The middle tab will contain the legislation, and the last tab will have lots of resources, great resources available to sort of really dig into that topic a little further. So that's sort of our first resource I wanted to highlight. Next up, I want to talk about some courses that are also available, and these are courses that are all available for free, but it's a great resource in terms of continuing education, both as an employer, but also for your staff. So hopefully most people are familiar with CCOHS, which is the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health Health and Safety. It's a not-for-profit organization based out of Ottawa that produces health and safety resources and material for Canada as a whole. So they try not to limit it by jurisdiction. So if you go to the website for CCOHS by following the QR code, you'll see a listing of approximately 100 courses, e-courses that they have on various topics of health and safety. I'd say half of those are for free and the other half you have to pay for. And the cost for the other half is anywhere from $27 to $110 per course. What the government of Nova Scotia has now done is they've taken the ones that you have to pay for, and of those 50, they've taken about 30 of them, and they have offered them for free. The only difference is you have to register for those courses through our website. So this QR code will take you directly to our website, and then you can take those courses for free, up to a maximum of 5 courses per year. And finally, hopefully you're all familiar with Skills Online, which is again a free resource through the government of Nova Scotia. We have a number of courses available on occupational health and safety there. So I'm just going to show you, sorry, this is CCOHS. If you want to take those courses, this is how to do it through our website. And I've identified some of the courses that people have taken through our website last year, I guess the most popular. So this is kind of, as you can imagine, a lot of these are, you have to pay for, but this is the ones that people take the most commonly. And I sort of wanted to mention, based on the discussion here today, Skills Online has some great resources around health and safety, but also sort of in supporting you to make your business more attractive to recruitment. You'll see this is sort of all the ones that I've identified that will attach to businesses. So welcoming workplaces, unconscious bias, cross-cultural communication. These are simple courses that you could, as a member of your JOSH committees, perhaps they might want to consider taking. And I want to spend a little bit more time talking about New and Vulnerable Worker Safety course, which is our newest release on this platform. This was a result of a Minister's Education Trust Fund application that was put in by the Federation of Labour, and they were looking for a course designed for new workers to Nova Scotia or youth, so youth anywhere from 15 to 25 who will be entering the workplace for the first time. So this is an excellent course. It takes about 3 hours to complete in total. There are modules, which you'll see here: Introduction to Health and Safety, Roles and Responsibilities, Systems and Processes, High-Risk Hazards, and then Occupation-Specific Occupation. It's available for free in both English and French, and you will get a certificate of completion at the end. So we just want to really highlight this for your own reference, but it's a great course that you might want to consider having your new workers take as part of the onboarding process, because it will really highlight a lot of the concepts that we've discussed here today. Next up is just to show you sort of our Make the Right Call campaign, how to reach the safety branch if ever you have to report a situation, or if you have any questions, you can always contact us as well at safetybranch@novascotia.ca. Our 1-800 number is 1-800-9-LABOR, and of course we the phone number is confidential and it's monitored 24/7. And again, they will be the concerns or complaints will be responded in accordance of urgency or importance. So if it's a high risk situation, obviously that will be addressed first. But they will respond to you if you have any questions or concerns or just like some more information. Next up, I just wanted to kind of share some of our online presence and our social media address as well. This is our main website. WorkSafe for Life is a joint project that the Department of Labor has with Workers' Compensation Board, so they have some great resources there as well. We've talked about NovaSafe. I definitely urge you to keep that as a tool for your digital toolbox. Some great topics there as well. YouTube will have those various videos that we discussed. And finally, for anybody who is on X, we do have a presence on X, and we recently released some updates involving sun safety and some of the resources available there. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I realize that there has been a lot of material to cover here today. So thank you very much for your attention. And I guess I just wanted to open the floor to anybody if you had any questions for me.